Is raising 3 children really this exhausting? Trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your path. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6. Let's go back several days before that trip to the hospital. It is 3:30 in the afternoon. My 3-year-old is begging me to read her favorite book for the zillionth time. My 1-year-old is just waking up from his nap, and he is cranky. My newborn is nursing hungrily, and I am so tired. I know what all you moms are thinking. Yeah, we have all been there, and we are all tired. But this tired seemed different than from my tiredness after the birth of my first 2 children. I heard one sufferer of severe fatigue compare her ailment to a well full of refreshing water. Throughout the day, as you spend your energy, you continually take from the well. And when the last drop is drained from the well, there is simply no more to be found. That's it, no more. Done for the day. It doesn't matter if the children are filthy and need a bath. It doesn't matter if the little one has not yet had her Bible time and prayers. It doesn't matter if dinner has not yet been prepared. No matter what needs to be done, there is no more water in the well. That is how tired I felt. It seemed to get worse instead of better, and all I could think about was my next opportunity to rest. I was also having nagging back pain that was sometimes quite painful, significant weight loss, though I looked at this as a blessing after child number 3, and a fever that would come on intensely for a day and then disappear with no explanation for its cause. Derek became particularly worried when the dishes sat longer in the sink than I previously tolerated, and he finally urged me to see a doctor. After several weeks of resisting, I made an appointment with the only available doctor at Keller Army Hospital. When, with great embarrassment, I explained that my primary complaint was fatigue, the doctor dutifully, though without great haste or concern, ordered blood work. When I returned the following week for my results, it was explained to me that my liver levels were a bit high. I later learned that normal is about 11, and my numbers were in the mid-400s. All appeared well, and my problem was most likely postpartum depression. I reasoned with the doctor that although I did recently give birth and fatigue is a symptom of postpartum depression, I was in no way depressed. This did not lessen the doctor's confidence in her diagnosis. I went home feeling both frustrated and embarrassed. Clearly, I was blowing my symptoms out of proportion. I was feeling the strain of motherhood, and apparently I wasn't handling it well. This disheartened me, as I loved being a mother, and I so wanted to be good at it. I knew I had much to learn and work on as a mom, but why did I seem to be so much tired than all the other mothers? What was I doing wrong? Was I kidding myself that I was capable of homeschooling these children beginning the following year? Upon arriving home, I found Derek waiting for me on the couch with the children asleep for their naps. I was thankful for the quiet time with Derek. I explained the doctor's diagnosis of postpartum depression, my belief that the diagnosis was hooey, and my resolution that the doctor felt the need to create an illness because nothing was wrong with me. I simply needed to step up to the challenges of my life. Derek didn't go for it. He quietly stood, reached for the phone, and explained to someone at Keller Hospital that his wife was sick. She did not have postpartum depression, and a CT scan was required. You see, Derek had done extensive internet research, and he suspected that there might be a problem with my gallbladder. This was what he hoped the CT scan would confirm or rule out. The hospital allowed for another appointment to be made with another doctor, but before the date of that appointment arrived, I became sick with a nasty flu. Fever, vomiting, headache, backache, congestion, the works. I was miserable, but it was the flu. Everyone gets the flu, no big deal. However, my husband thought this was our chance to get the attention of the doctors, and he insisted I go to the emergency room. I argued that this was silly. Everyone waits out the flu. but I was touched by his concern for me, so I conceded. Surprisingly, I was not turned away at the door. I met a nice doctor with a thick British accent who not only listened to and considered my current symptoms, but considered the symptoms I had been experiencing the past few months as well. You can imagine my shock when he suggested a CT scan and when he suggested that we expect the worst. Was the worst a malfunctioning gallbladder? It seemed Derek and I had won our battle, and my task was now to go and eliminate the possibility of problems with my gallbladder. The next morning, I went to Keller Hospital for my scan. I admit it was difficult. I was still nauseous, and I was required to drink a barium mixture supposedly disguised in Crystal Light lemonade. I cannot drink Crystal Light to this day. When it was done, I went straight home, feeling productive and finished. I was to return the following week for my results. Upon walking into my home, I again found Derek waiting for me on the couch and the children asleep. I told him about the awful drink, and I was just about to tell him about the scan tube and how it works. He loves the mechanic of that stuff. When the phone rang. It was the hospital. I must pause for my story to give all readers a warning based on my experiences. If you ever have a medical test and the hospital calls you within an hour, it is not good news. Hospital personnel do not feel the need to pick up the phone and immediately call to let you know that scans are clean and tests are negative, which was not the case in our situation. The head of ER, because the test was ordered from the ER, was calling to tell us to return immediately to the hospital. She would not convey over the phone what was found by the scan, but she did suggest finding childcare and packing an overnight bag, as an ambulance would be arriving to transport us to Westchester Medical Center, a facility more capable of dealing with my condition. Click. That was all they gave us. I was immediately terrified and burst into tears. For several minutes, I was unable to calm myself enough to convey to Derek what had been reported to me on the phone, which was not much. I had no idea what was wrong with me, and I quickly learned that I have a wild imagination. But once rational thought returned, Derek and I decided that it must be my gallbladder after all. It took more than a couple of hours to negotiate overnight childcare, but we were blessed by dear friends who worked out a system of caring for my children and theirs until my mom was able to arrive from Florida the next morning. I remember seven-month-old Rebecca smiling at me through watery eyes and a runny nose as I walked out the door. I hated to leave her when she was suffering from her first nasty cold. I had decided only a few days before that it was time for her to learn to take a bottle, something she had resisted mightily. It had required refusing to nurse her for a full day before she agreed to take the bottle of thawed breast milk. I was thankful as I left for the hospital that she would take the bottles, but I was distressed by the fact that I had not had the opportunity to pump any breast milk, and she would need it more than ever now that she was fighting this cold. I said a little prayer as Derek and I left for the hospital, dreading that they might tell us I needed my gallbladder removed. Keller Army Hospital ER is small, and the evening Derek and I walked in for the scan results, it was relatively quiet. I felt the eyes of all the staff on us, though I was sure I must have been imagining this. They quickly led us back to a triple patient room, where a curtain was closed between us and a mother with her teenage daughter whose ear was infected from a recent piercing. This is all the privacy we get, I thought. Thankfully, the girl and her mother were released before the soft-spoken British doctor came in to share the findings of the scan. Quickly, in a no-nonsense fashion, he delivered the news. A very large tumor was found on my liver. Keller was not equipped to test any further, so we were sent immediately to Westchester Medical Center, where he had already spoken with a liver specialist. Additional tests would be performed, and the tumor would most likely be chopped out. Chopped out? His words made me giggle, though it certainly wasn't funny. We were immediately filled with questions. Where did it come from? What additional tests? When would they take it out? How long would I be in the hospital? Could it be cancer? The ER doctor, who I later realized was making educated guesses as he tried to answer our questions, assured us it would not be cancer, suggested the tumor was probably caused by the birth control pills I had taken prior to my first pregnancy, suggested I could be in the hospital for 3 weeks, and acknowledged that any further questions would be better addressed to the surgeon at Westchester Medical Center. We were then given directions to the hospital, apparently the ambulance would not be needed, and told we were expected immediately. As we traveled the hour drive to Westchester, we called our family, asking for prayer. We still know little more than I had a large tumor that would most likely need to be removed quickly. Once at the hospital, we were admitted to a room, interviewed by our resident. I was hooked up to an IV, blood tests were taken, and a chest x-ray was performed, all without removing me from my bed. We then waited for our late-night meeting with the surgeon. It was suggested by the resident that a biopsy would most likely be required before surgery was scheduled, and it was our understanding that the test would be performed in the morning. Dr. Marcelo Fichuto, a doctor not more than a few years older than us, surprised us with his shaky English and his humble manner, yet his confidence in what he did was reassuring. He did not feel a biopsy was necessary, as the tumor was quite large, 14.5 centimeters, and was pressing on my stomach, so it would have to be removed regardless. This was the cause of my recent weight loss. Furthermore, he reasoned, on the unlikely chance that the tumor was cancerous, a biopsy could cause spreading. Because of the size, he suggested that the tumor be removed quickly, though he assured us it was no emergency. We asked when he would suggest, and he replied, "I am available next Tuesday." So that was it. Major livery surgery scheduled, and it did not even dawn on me until later that night that next Tuesday was my 30th birthday. The days preceding my surgery felt surreal, but I admit I was having a ball. My mom arrived at my home on Saturday morning and relieved my friends of childcare duty before Derek and I even returned from the initial testing that first night at the hospital. Though I did not attend church the following day, Derek went and asked for prayers from our congregation. He was overwhelmed by the church's immediate response to pray and to lay hands on him. This act of faith and action meant a great deal to both of us. On Monday, my father and my sister Kim arrived, and a few close girlfriends came over that afternoon for a festive surprise birthday party one day early. We had Chinese food for dinner, one of my favorites, and I quickly fell asleep, overwhelmed with love and peace. The next morning, while I slept peacefully, the doctors removed half my liver, the entire left lobe. Derek and Audra completed crossword puzzles, while Mrs. Milligan made various phone calls to update the family. My dad and Kim tried to read, and my mom stayed home to care for our 3 precious babies. Undoubtedly, the time was easiest for me. After a little more than 5 hours, Dr. Fichuto emerged to tell my family that the surgery had gone well. A blood transfusion had not been necessary, something that had concerned us beforehand, and adequate margins had been removed. It wasn't until all the good news had been shared that the doctor informed Derek and our family that the tumor had in fact been malignant, a rare form of liver cancer called hepatocellular carcinoma, fibrolamellar variant, which strikes young men and women for reasons unknown. Dr. Fichuto then insisted that my focus once I awoke needed to be my recovery from the surgery, not the fact that the tumor had been cancer. He asked that I not be told immediately. The doctor told Derek that later in the week we will tell her together. Derek hesitantly agreed, praying he was doing the right thing. When I awoke in the recovery room, I was amazed by the pain I felt. They had asked me before the surgery to rate my pain level on a scale of 1 to 10. It had been 0. They asked me again after the surgery, and after careful consideration, I gave it a 7. 10 seemed like a logical response, but I realistically considered that there was certainly pain greater than this. I couldn't help but think of Christ on the cross and the pain he must have endured undeservedly. I was comforted greatly by the presence of Derek and my dad, though my visual memories of them are brief. Apparently, my eyes were closed most of the time, a common reaction to the pain. They talked quietly to me, as there were many other patients crowded in the recovery room, separated by curtains. They assured me I was being given pain medications and the pain would diminish shortly. I remember the nurse asking if my pain was better and what I would now rate my pain. My response was 6 3/4. To be honest, I did not notice a decrease of pain, but I felt the need to reward and encourage her efforts. I must have fallen asleep again, because when I awoke, it was much later and Derek and my dad were gone. My pain was definitely better, but I was desperate for Derek, and I couldn't find anyone to help me get him. I knew he wouldn't leave me if he was not made to do so, and I had been told that visitors were rarely let into the recovery room, but it seemed like a ridiculous policy to me. The nurses were obviously too busy to deal with my insecurity, and I knew Derek would make me feel dramatically better. A nurse finally came to check me, and she informed me that it was very late and Derek would not be allowed to return until morning. I felt exhausted, despite my long nap through the surgery and again afterward. I figured I would just sleep until he was able to return. It didn't take me long to realize that the morphine I was getting was not going to allow me to sleep. Okay, I admit that I did not realize anything at that particular time. I was a zombie. But later, once I had regained my ability to think and function, I knew that the morphine was seriously impeding my ability to sleep. It may not sound like anything that should be a problem, but the inability to sleep when your body and mind are consumed with exhaustion is extremely frustrating. I have noticed over the years that the symptoms or conditions that have been most difficult to tolerate have been those that I previously would have deemed most tolerable. These are usually the times when I believe God is working to focus my mind and my spirit on the strength I can find only in the comfort of His arms. After an excruciating night of no sleep, though I admit a painless night, and for that I am most thankful, I was rewarded by a short visit from Derek. They only allowed him 5 minutes, after which Mrs. Milligan and Audra were let in for a short visit. Unfortunately, during this time, the nurses decided I should try to sit up. My intolerance of the morphine was made clear upon my movement. The immediate nausea was overwhelming. Mrs. Milligan informed me Kim was waiting to see me, though they would not allow her to come in immediately. Derek was told that they needed to remove the IV from my neck, which was the way I was receiving the morphine. Kim would then be allowed to come in and see me. What seemed like hours, and probably was, passed. The IV was eventually removed, and I was able to rest a little as soon as the morphine ceased. However, Kim never came, and I was as anxious as I have ever felt. I assumed she had left, but she and Derek had actually been told over and over that she was not allowed to come in until the nurse came and said it was okay. The nurse never came. Her name was Brittany. Brittany came to check on me only once that I recall during the long period when I did not see Derek or the rest of my family. She told me it was time to wash up, and she apparently placed a wet washcloth, soap, a toothbrush, and toothpaste on the table near my bed. However, the morphine had not yet been removed, and I was completely disoriented. I must not have been opening my eyes, because I remember thinking desperately that I could not find the things I needed to wash my face and brush my teeth. The sudden realization that I was unable to complete this basic personal need was intensely frightening, and I immediately started to cry. This seemed to get Brittany's attention. She came immediately and reprimanded me for making so much noise. There were, after all, people here recovering from major surgery. She then asked, with what I remember as great frustration in her voice, why I had not yet washed my face and brushed my teeth. Now, in all fairness, I admit that my memories are fuzzy and the morphine was making me more than a little loopy. I may be remembering the details as darker than they actually were, but my feelings of fear and anxiety were intense and quite real. Soon after my ordeal with Brittany, Kim appeared. Brittany had never gone to get my sister, who had been waiting with Derek for hours, but Kim finally took it upon herself to get to me. Despite Brittany's occasional verbal attacks, bringing Kim to tears more than once, Kim sat holding my hand until they were able to remove me from the recovery room. She said nothing to me, which was a gift, because I had little energy to chat. The comfort of her presence and her hand pressed around mine gave me the peace I needed to finally rest. I was also comforted by 3 small pictures, one of each of my children, that Derek had thoughtfully taped to the guardrail of my hospital bed before I awoke from the initial anesthetic. Thankfully, as I was moved from one unit to another throughout my stay in the hospital, I was never removed from this bed, and my pictures were always with me. Within a few hours, I was removed from the recovery room and brought to a semi-private room where I would remain the next 5 days in the hospital. I remember Brittany's relief at my leaving. I would be one less patient to care for, and I even remember the comment of the man wheeling me from my space in the recovery room, who observed, "Wow, she isn't very nice to you, is she?" His observation validated my frustration, but I was also now well aware of the impossible job of an overworked nurse whose patients are desperately in need of attention and care. Praise God. Once out of recovery, Derek was allowed to stay with me until 8 p.m., at which time he moved to a short, hard couch in the visitor's lounge down the hall. I knew that if I needed him, I could get to him, dragging all manner of tubes behind me. For 5 days, he did not leave the hospital and rarely left my side. There was such comfort in knowing that he was near, my hero. The second day out of recovery, I awoke feeling like $1,000,000. I immediately informed the nurses that I would need no more narcotics, and I requested only Advil for the pain. This was not so bad. On day 3, however, I awoke crying. Wow, the pain and the soreness were shocking. Though I did not return to narcotics, I did allow heavier painkillers to help me through the next few days. What a blessing. Once the pain was under control, I remember my days in the hospital fondly. I spent precious time, just me and Derek, still recovering from the shock that I was recovering from a liver tumor we did not know existed just 1 week before. Kim would come to visit, which is always fun, but what I remember most is the great amount of time I spent alone with my dad. He had been busy during my earlier childhood, running a family juice company with my grandfather. The company was sold to Campbell Soup and reacquired by my father and grandfather just a couple years before my surgery. He had been absorbed with reestablishing Juice Bowl the past couple of years. I was shocked when he arrived 2 days after the finding of the tumor, planning to stay more than a week. Despite my dad's recently realized but intense fear of heights, he drove day after day over mountains and cliff roads to visit me by himself in my hospital room. I treasured this time greatly. When my father was there, Derek was able to take a break for a meal or to run home for a shower and 3 baby hugs and kisses. However, it was clear to me, though I did not understand why, that Derek did not wish to ever leave me, most especially when Dr. Fisciuto might be by. It was during one of these quick trips home, leaving me in the care of my father, that the doctor made an unexpected round to my room. For some unknown reason, the doctor decided that he would share with me during this visit, while Derek was away, that the tumor was malignant. I was shocked, to say the least. I felt as though the wind had been knocked out of me, and I immediately felt hot tears running down my face. I wish I were one of those gifted people who can speak through their tears, but my tears bind me to silence, and often make me feel foolish. This was one of those times. I wanted to show strength and faith in this life-changing moment, and all I felt was weak and broken. I was fearful that Derek was not there, but I was immeasurably thankful for the presence of my dad. Who better to have than your father as your life seems irrevocably different and desperately frightening? He held me, he comforted me, and then he knew to call Derek without me even having to ask. Derek was in the car headed home for a shower. He immediately turned back, and by the time he arrived in the hospital room, I was calm and no longer afraid. Dr. Fisciuto had told me that if a person was to have liver cancer, this was the best type of cancer to have. It was slow growing, and he had removed all that was there. He assured me that the cancer was gone and that I was cured. Cured before I even knew I had cancer. So really, my situation was no different than it had been the hour before. The tumor was gone, and I was cancer-free. I am not sure Derek has ever convinced himself that his decision not to tell me immediately about the cancer was the right one. But I have always loved that while he hated to keep something from me, he was willing to do whatever it took to care for me in the best possible way. I was also touched by something Derek shared with me that had happened while I was in the recovery room. As he and my dad were walking to the cafeteria together to get something to eat, they ran into two friends of Derek's from work who had been performing taps for a veteran's funeral at the cemetery nearby and had spontaneously come to the hospital to check on me and Derek. Although it was not a good time to see me, one of Derek's friends asked if they could pray for me. So powerful to me is the image of these four men, including my father, circling together and praying for me in the lobby of the Westchester Hospital. I loved that. On day 5, the drainage tube was removed. My final IV was removed, half of the 47 staples were removed, and I was released. I was free. Free from the tubes, free from doctors, and free from the hospital. I couldn't wait to get home to Ashley, Luke, and Rebecca. My mom had brought them for a short time to the visitors' lounge a couple days before, but I was itching to get home where I could snuggle, read, and giggle with them again. The ride home was a bit bumpy, though Derek drove extremely carefully, but I was rewarded by two precious children running through the backyard to greet me. My excitement to see them immediately turned to fear as I held my incredibly sore abdomen and watched them barreling towards me with no understanding of my pain. Derek, of course, stepped between me and them, scooped them both up, and brought them to me to lean over and give me gentle loving. He explained to them my pain and limitations for the next 6 weeks. I could not hold the baby, my greatest struggle. I could lift nothing. I could not drive, and I needed lots of rest. Ashley and Luke promised to be careful and to help me whenever possible, and little baby Rebecca smiled a smile I was sure was more medicinal than anything I had received in the hospital. I was heartbroken that our precious time of nursing was cut short and that I would not be able to lift Rebecca for what felt like an eternity, but I was overcome with thankfulness that the cancer had been found and removed, allowing me a full lifetime with my family.